Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam Fain, and this week we're talking about The Lonely Hearts Club, episode 4 of season 2 of the Quantum Leap Revival. I'm really looking forward to this one. I have seen this episode 3 times now, and I have to be honest, I love it. At first, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, especially the Leap story, but by the end of my first viewing, I thought it was just a superb episode, a wonderful compliment to episode 3 in so many ways, while being very different in a lot of ways as well. My second viewing, I was engaged. I enjoyed it. I think I was even more emotionally involved in it. And then on my third watch, I just came away from it feeling like this might be one of the best episodes of the whole series. You know, genuinely. I mean, you look at all of season 1, you look at all of season 2. This episode is really incredible, and it's really unlike any other episode that we've gotten so far in some ways. And I don't know, I appreciated it so much more. And I have a feeling there are people that might not agree with that assessment. And that's totally fine, of course. Like, everyone should formulate their own opinions about this show, and the art that we watch, we digest, and the differing perspectives that we share can absolutely enhance, I think, all of our enjoyment. But from my personal perspective, I ended up just loving it, and think it's an exceptional episode of Quantum Leap, an exceptional episode of television, because it just does so many really interesting things. And the funny thing is that I had the opportunity, by the time you're seeing this, you'll know Matt, Dale, and I from the Quantum Leap podcast, we collaborated on an interview with the writer for this episode, Laurie. And first of all, Christy was phenomenal. What a wonderful guest to have. And working with Matt was so much fun. I felt like it was really a breeze. There are a couple of moments which you probably won't see on the video, because Albie from the Quantum Leap podcast was kind enough to edit it and put some polish on it, which I'm not always capable of. And so you probably miss a couple of the moments, but really there were only like 2 times we talked over one another, or jumped in to ask a question at the same time. So I thought it was just wonderful. Obviously I love Matt and everything that he does. And it was just a really wonderful experience all around. And Christy was phenomenal. And the funny thing is when we spoke to Christy, I liked the episode. In fact, I would even go so far as to say I love the episode. I thought it was great. But for an episode to just grow, in my estimation, after seeing it a couple more times, I don't think I was quite prepared for that. And it wasn't necessarily because of the conversation with Christy, although certainly I felt like we were able to get some really wonderful information about the episode overall. It was something more than that. And I'm not 100% sure what it is. Maybe we'll discover it together as I talk about the episode throughout the course of this episode of Fate's Wide Wheel. But of course, before I get to all of that, I want to take a moment to shout out some special folks. In particular, everyone who has liked and subscribed, especially all of the new subscribers over on YouTube. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Those subscriptions help a lot, and will go, hopefully further towards being able to allow me to do some really cool things on YouTube, which right now, because of the subscriber count, I don't have access to, which, whatever, YouTube. I'm happy to be here. But the more subscribers that I get, the more opportunities that I'll have for, of course, the podcast and to engage with folks on YouTube in a different way, which I'm very excited about. In particular, something that I really want to do, as silly as this might sound, is put links in the videos. And I can't do that until I get to 500 subscribers. I know, right? It sounds a little silly, but hey, YouTube's got their things. They've got their reasons, so I'm just going to trust it and go with it. So if I get to 500 subscribers, I can start putting links in these videos, so that when I start talking about something random, there can be a link and you can click on it and you can go and see that new, 4K Blu-ray that I'm just happening to talk about because I'm excited about that week. Or even better yet, associated with Quantum Leap, if I'm talking about an actor, you'll have a link perhaps to their IMDb or their Wikipedia, so that you can learn a little bit more about that actor that I'm discussing. Or if there's an element of the episode, last week, for instance, is a perfect example with Closer Encounters. The references I made to some of the real life stuff, Project Sign, the Bell 47 helicopter, being able to kind of put those links in the videos and give viewers the opportunity to kind of like bookmark that stuff for future use, I just think would be really cool to do. Obviously, people can go and they can search it. They can pull up their phones. They can do all that stuff on their own. And I'm sure many, many, many people did that before they even came to my video. But it would just be something that I think I would like to do. It would enhance some stuff. And of course, by now you've probably seen the Deborah Pratt interview. It would have been a really wonderful way to include and embed links for her websites and for the Kickstarter for Warrior One. So that's just something that I want to do. And if I can get to 500 subscribers, then we're in the clear and we can start doing that. So yeah, tell your friends, like, subscribe if you haven't done that already. It really does help the channel out, and I really truly appreciate it. Speaking of appreciation, I'm also incredibly touched and amazed. We've got new Patreon subscribers. So shout out to MercuryBeat, to James Gould, who I think I may have already shouted out, but just in case, I know that they're a new subscriber, so I want to get that right there. And of course, to the Quantum Leap podcast. That's right. I mean, how cool is that? They're supporting the show as well, and I'm really grateful for that. I also want to give a special shout out to Max, the mental health warrior from Madison, Wisconsin. Max, thank you so much for your support, your encouragement, and your message. I really, really appreciated that, and I look forward to chatting with you more in the future, seeing what we can cook up as far as potential collaborations and that stuff. As always, thank you so much to all of the subscribers. I really, just could not do this without you. It has become increasingly apparent to me that with the Patreon support, I am able to pay for all of the hosting now, and that is such a gift. The website, the actual podcast hosting service that I use, and of course the virtual studio that I use, Riverside. I can pay for all of that now because of you, because of your support. None of that has to come out of my pocket anymore. As a stay-at-home parent slash struggling actor, whatever you want to call me, that means so much. It gives me the opportunity to keep doing this, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, because I'm this is just so much fun for me to get to do and to share with you. So thanks as always to Al's Play Sleep fan site, Bourbon and Boardgames, Carolyn, Cosplay Dad, Joanne, Bartlett, Dana Bius, Rich Bourque, Kevin, Carol Davis, Deckslower, Dermot, Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganni, Jason Geis, Kelly M, Michelle Hoffman, Amy Holtcamp, Laurie Johnson, Bess A, Korey, Lady Eternal, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmon, Adrian Sal, Karen Saxon, Jerry Seward, Mike Stouffer, Heather Strabiak, Damon Sugamelli, Larry Trujillo, Stuart Williams, Jill Wilson, and anonymous patrons. Thank you all so very much. I truly, truly appreciate it. I know there's some names in there. You're probably thinking to myself, oh, I haven't actually contributed lately or whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, you have contributed. You were a paid member at one time. And even if you're not right now, it's all good by me. Maybe you'll come back to the fold. Maybe you won't. But the fact is that you help this podcast, and I appreciate you. So thank you so very much. However, if you are an active and current paid member, you will get access to things like exclusive early access videos. For instance, the special interview I conducted with Deborah Pratt. Subscribers on the Patreon actually got that a whole day earlier. In some instances, you might get that stuff 2 or 3 days earlier. But in this case, it was a day earlier, just because of editing time, etc., and wanted to correspond with her about a couple of things before I posted it. So got that 24 hours earlier. There will be more stuff in the future coming very soon, some exciting stuff that I cannot wait to tell you about. So head over to that Patreon. As always, make sure you're helping out your community in any way that you can, whether it's volunteering, giving a little money to a local charity, or the world at large. Obviously, I'm a broken record. I will always shout out the Trevor Project and Doctors Without Borders. There are many causes that need our help right now, and there are a lot of wrongs that need to be set right. So let's do what we can. If after all of that, you still have some change rattling around and you want to throw it my way, I am grateful. Head over to Patreon, Fates Wide Wheel, and you will get the skinny on all of what you need to sign up and to donate to the podcast. And of course, those extra goodies. There's going to be some giveaways in the future as well. So yeah, lots of cool stuff brewing, and I cannot wait to share it with you, but I'm not ready to do it just yet. So there's the tease for now. What else is happening now that I've been able to thank all of you wonderful people that I can talk about briefly? Ooh, I know. Recently, there was the Criterion 50% off flash sale. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, if you're looking behind me, you know that I love physical media. Right over here, that is all of my Criterion Blu-rays and some DVDs still in the mix there that I haven't upgraded or can't upgrade because they don't have the license anymore. However, the flash sale was just earlier last week, and as a subscriber to the Criterion channel, and having made a lot of purchases over the years, I ended up having quite a bit in gift certificates. And so I was like, hey, this is the perfect time to use these gift certificates. And there's no like minimum purchase with the gift certificates. Criterion's awesome. Head over to criterion.com if you've not heard of them as a label. They've got some incredible movies. Even if you're more of like a casual viewer, I mean, we're talking like Princess Bride, Breakfast Club, like just some really great stuff, newer stuff, obviously. If you're into Scorsese, they did a wonderful edition of The Irishman. Marriage Story has a beautiful edition that actually includes like photocopies of the handwritten letters that Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson actually wrote as their characters to one another and read in the film. So just some really cool stuff like that. Audio commentaries, behind the scenes documentaries, etc. Their stuff is usually loaded. This time around, I had a wonderful conversation with someone recently about films and about how sometimes we don't challenge ourselves the way that we should. And part of that is because that challenging stuff doesn't always make the cinema. And so we have to seek it out, which is a challenge in and of itself. So I've been trying to, make sure that I'm doing a little bit more of that recently. And one of the things that I picked up that I'm very, very excited about, haven't even opened it yet, is Small Axe, 5 films by Steve McQueen, the director, not the actor. And just in case, this is a collection of 5 films that Steve McQueen made for the BBC a few years back. And they spotlight West Indian life in London from the late 60s into the early 80s. All 5 of the films are just, from what I've heard, I haven't seen them yet. I did this kind of on a blind buy, are just incredibly well done. Letitia Wright, John Boyega, amongst others. So wonderful cast. And I'm just really, really looking forward to seeing these films. The really neat thing is that because they were made for BBC and there weren't, run times could be a little bit more flexible. So like one of the films is, like 2 hours and 20 minutes. And then one of them is like 64 minutes. And so it really allowed the creative team to just tell the story and not worry about the constraints of time, which I know our Quantum Leap crew would probably really, really love. Excuse me. So I am really looking forward to that one. It was definitely a purchase that I knew I was going to make, even though it was going to be a bit of a blind buy. This one was not a blind buy. Also, haven't had a chance to open it yet. This is the 4K edition of David Bowie's, not David Bowie's, but Moon Age Daydream, which is a film about David Bowie. And Brett Morgan, the director, just did a phenomenal job putting this together. It's filled with all sorts of rare, backstage behind the scenes clips, as well as televised interviews with Bowie and collaborators. And it's just a really beautiful film. I believe it is available on Max. So if you've not seen it yet and you want to check it out, you can check it out over there. If you want to get it with all the bells and whistles, of course, you can pick up the Criterion edition, the 4K. I'm really looking forward to popping in. I'm very, very excited about that and looking forward to putting those in. So that's some of the new stuff that I've got going on around here. Let's talk a little bit of podcast business / personal life stuff. So as most of you know, I am actually an actor. Like that's literally what I did for a living for a time, and then ended up going into nonprofit arts here in Chicago. And I was working for a nonprofit arts company at the time the pandemic hit. I got laid off because a lot of what I was doing focused on marketing and group events. And at that time, I transitioned over into stay-at-home parent. Now, all of this happened, of course, as the podcast was going on. My life changed so much while we were doing this podcast, and I went from being engaged married. I was married when the podcast started. Married, becoming a parent, to switching jobs, which happened somewhere in between there, I believe. Shortly after the podcast started, I switched jobs and working full-time nonprofit arts. It was great. I loved that aspect, but I was always hungry to get back to acting. When the pandemic hit, none of that was happening anyway. So I became a stay-at-home parent. After the pandemic let up, as you know, I've participated in a few shows, some staged readings, etc., over the past couple of years, but haven't really had a chance to really get things moving again. And recently, some wonderful opportunities have come my way, some auditions and stuff. So I actually was offered work in 2 shows that will start. One starts tonight, actually. I'm recording this on Tuesday, the 24th. One starts tonight, and the run is throughout to December. And then the next one immediately starts, actually, before this project closes, starts rehearsals, and then will open soon after. And then there's another show that, is a possibility that would go after that. So basically, I would be, I'd be working, which is awesome. But it would absolutely get in the way potentially of some of the activities that I normally do, including, and perhaps most importantly, the watch parties. That doesn't mean they're going away. It just means that there might be a slight change, some guest hosts, hopefully to fill in when I am unable to be there. I'm navigating this and trying to, figure it out as best I can, because it's obviously, not unexpected. It was something certainly that I hoped would happen, but it's not something that I knew I was going to be planning for right away. So, I mean, that's the career that I've always wanted, and I continue to, to audition and get out there, and to be able to have work, is wonderful, and I'm so excited. But like I said, it will end up affecting the watch parties, especially. I don't think it'll affect anything else. The interviews that I currently have lined up, everything's good with those. Won't affect the production of the podcast. The watch parties, and to be fair, the watch parties have been smaller this season, I think, just due to the time change and the day change for the show, which is understandable and totally fine. But I want to continue to offer that as best I can. So I'm gonna, like I said, we'll see what happens, but hopefully I can get some guest hosts to kind of hold down the fort and carry on the watch parties. And then when I am available, certainly I will be there for those. But due to the rehearsal schedule, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do at least a few of the rest of the episodes of this first 8. We'll see what happens after. Once the runs are open, most of the shows don't run on Wednesdays, so I should be fine. It's like a Thursday through Sunday run, so I should be okay. The shows run between 4 to 6 weekends, depending on the production. I think one of them could have an extension, so we'll take it as it comes. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you updated. And I really, really appreciate everyone who has turned out for the watch parties. And I'd love to keep that going, and certainly want to try to get some guests in, even if I can't be there. So we'll see what happens. Maybe some fun stuff can happen even when I'm not around. So yeah, thank you in advance for your understanding and patience as I kind of navigate that and figure all that out with the new schedule. That's really about it. I think it's time to talk about the Lonely Hearts Club. So let's dive right in and uncover what I love so much about this episode. The Lonely Hearts Club was written by Christy Laurie, directed by MJ Bassett, and we are in the year 2000 in Los Angeles, California. And Ben has leapt into Summer Walsh, an assistant to Neal Russell's agent. Neal Russell is played by Tim Matheson, and we see Tim right away in that wonderful leap out from Closure Encounters, and we get this spirited monologue about taking guys out, getting the thing, getting out. It's wonderful because even as I watched it, it had this energy and it had this familiarity that once Quentin Tarantino is name checked, just Quentin, the couple of times in the episode, it's just sort of like, oh yeah, that's that world. I can totally see that. Neal Russell is an aging actor, star on the wane, had a hit television series. It was a little nebulous on the time, and this might be bad note taking on my part. I couldn't tell if it was like late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was like an early 80s sort of sitcom. Awful Good Together, which is just an awesome title for a sitcom. Co-starring Laura Evans, who is played by Erica Gimple, and we'll get to her a little bit later. But just the setup of this and kind of the swerve going from this in-your-face, moment where you think, oh my gosh, what has Ben gotten himself into this time? And it becomes clear we hear the bells and the set moves, and it's clear that they're on a back lot, which is great because they're on a back lot, and that's got to be maybe not easy to film, but certainly a little bit easier than recreating some of the places and locations that they've had to in the past. Tim Matheson's energy throughout the course of this episode is just fantastic. Tim is I mean, the guy has literally been working for like 60 years. Tim is just a fantastic actor and performer. And one of his earliest gigs was the voice of Johnny Quest on the animated Johnny Quest series. He also appeared at age 13 on Robert Young's CBS nostalgia comedy series Window on Main Street, as well as appearing in a couple of episodes of Leave It to Beaver. He continued his participation with the Hanna-Barbera series in the 60s, Sinbad Jr. in his Magic Belt, and Geis in Space Ghost. How can you not love Space Ghost? Also appeared in a number of films, Yours, Mine, and Ours with Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda. He was also in The Virginian, which is a Western television show from the late 60s. Appeared in an episode of Night Gallery, which is Rod Serling's show after The Twilight Zone. Also was in Bonanza for a season, and just numerous other television and film roles. He was actually up for the role of Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. For me, I'll just jump to the thing that really I think always has stood out the most to me, and that, of course, is his work in The West Wing as Vice President John Hoynes. He garnered 2 Emmy nominations for that. If you've not seen The West Wing, just stop the podcast and go watch it, all of it, and then you can come back. Okay, not all of it, the first 4 seasons at least, then come back. And in the 4th episode of season 1 in particular, 5 Votes Down, he is phenomenal, and he's only on screen for about 5-6 minutes. He encapsulates, I think, this character that was created to be kind of a foil to the president in many ways, to be a little bit of a thorn in the side of the staff at times, and someone that had an agenda and thought that he was justified in having that agenda for numerous reasons, which I won't spoil in case you haven't seen it, which if you haven't seen it, what are you doing here? Stop, go watch it. In those few moments, what he does with the character, the amount of nuance that he brings to it, the passion and compassion, wisdom, intelligence, everything. I mean, of course, it's on the page, right? But without a capable actor, sometimes it doesn't matter what's on the page, right? And he's just incredible and phenomenal in those moments. And I really, really, it's one of my favorite moments of West Wing ever. I genuinely mean that. I just think he's fantastic. And as many times as the character comes off as a bit of a bastard, this is a time when he certainly does not. And it's just really wonderful to see. Of course, he's opposite John Spencer, who plays Leo McGarry in the show, and John Spencer was just an actor nonpareil. I mean, I just think his work on The West Wing in particular was so good, and the fact that tragically he passed before he could really see that character through, although I think that the show did some incredible stuff in the wake of his passing. But just check that out if you've not seen it. It's only 4 episodes in, so you can just watch the first 4 episodes, but you won't want to stop. You'll want to keep going. Matheson's great throughout the course of the episode. Does so many wonderful things. There's a wonderful mirror shot that we get, as they're bringing, I'm not quite sure exactly what it is. I probably should know, but I don't know. But they're bringing this thing, this flexible, shiny metal thing, which could be for lighting. It could be, I don't know, they could be using it to make thunder. I don't know what they're using it for, quite frankly. It could just be a piece of a mirror that they're bringing across. I sound uneducated and like an idiot, so I'll move on. The mirror shot's amazing. From there, we get that Ben knows who this is. Like, he knows who Neal Russell is. He has this connection to Neal's career and has enjoyed his career. And it's also something that we get, right away, that it's something that he and Addison shared, their love of Neal Russell and watching Neal Russell's movies. And we get, Addison's favorite movie, for instance, was Duplicity. And Ben here calls Addison his ex, and refers to her in that way, which is interesting because prior to this, in Closure Encounters, he says he lost his fiance. And then in previous episodes, of course, he refers to her as his fiance. In This Took Too Long, for instance. So it's interesting to hear Ben, just say his ex in that respect. We get a wonderful moment here where Russell quotes Shakespeare, Henry VI, Part 3. To weep is to make less the depth of grief. And that's important for a lot of reasons, because there's some weeping over the course of this episode, and it's incredibly well done, well earned. And some of the weeping that happens will be the weeping that we do as we watch the episode. We also get this wonderful, speech from Russell about life being an adventure and it's meant to be lived. And I just love, there's a lot of really kind of neat meta references to the quality of Ben's life and leaping, and everything that kind of goes into that, and the parallels between the leap story and the personal, more emotional story for Ben, and some of the stuff happening back at the project are just so incredibly well done. I really appreciated how it was all. That's the amazing thing. Everything in this episode feels like one story. It's almost a cheat to call them parallels, because we've had previous episodes where we get kind of our A story or B story or C story. And sometimes, the A and B story match up in this perfect parallel, which is great. And then sometimes, they're a little bit more perpendicular, or whatever the case might be. But in this case, it just genuinely feels like all one story. We're just in different times and places, and it's a remarkable thing, and I really appreciated that about this episode, because it's not something that we always see. And even in an episode like Oh Ye of Little Faith, for instance, where I feel like Addison's journey over the course of that episode is tied to her not being involved in the leap, and yet we feel like we're getting this wonderful Addison story that wouldn't be able to be told without the leap. But this episode, it's like Addison's trajectory kind of just goes like this, because it's, here she is in the leap with Ben, now she's back in the project, but the story is, the through line for the story, it's still there. And it's, I don't know, I'm not doing it justice, but I really appreciated the fact that this episode does feel like one story, as opposed to feeling like the leap story, the project story, or A story, B story, whatnot. Even though obviously it could be talked about in those terms, there was a completeness to this episode, and sort of an integration of the times, and the difference between the times and places, that was really fantastic. So we also learned that Tom is the one who's getting credit for back at the project. Meanwhile, Tom is the one getting credit for bringing the project back to life. Tom, gives this speech about how incredible and important and unique the project is, how it's history, and how everybody should be proud to be a part of that. But of course, there's going to be an audit. There's some groans about all of this, and Tom hands the paperwork to Jen, which I thought was really interesting. Jen being the head of security, and kind of being the one to kind of maybe take control of all of this. It'll be really interesting to see where that goes, and to see what the nature of this audit actually is. Is it all going to be about money? Is it all going to be about paperwork? Or is there something deeper at play here? Of course, before we can even question that too much, there is something deeper at play here, because Tom brings to Ian's attention that there's these spikes in the energy requirements for the project. And Ian explains that. They say that, when Ben leaps, that it requires a lot of power to find him. And Tom brings it to Ian's attention that the spikes are higher than they even were 3 years ago, or in our terms in season 1. And they are kind of shocked by this, and they immediately start looking at it, and there's a gravity to this. There's something going on, and it was hinted at, of course, in the conversation between Jen and Ian at the end of 2, Jen asking them if they were going to tell people what really happened. From there, Addison comes in. Addison's super excited to see Ben with Neal Russell. She wants a full debrief. She wants to get all the details about spending time with Neal. But first they got to get to the mission. Ben knows that this has got to be around the time of Neal's disappearance. He disappeared in a boating accident, and some people even speculated that it was suicide, because his star was on the wane, etc. And he missed a Tonight Show appearance with Jay Leno. So they start to gather that they're there to save Neal and get Neal to the Tonight Show. That's the mission. Get Neal to the Tonight Show. Get him to the Greek. No, I don't want to talk about either one of those people, actually. Why did I reference that movie? Anyway, so at this point, aside from being a bit starstruck, they're also concerned now. They discover that Neal's ex, Laura Evans, who was also his co-star in Awful Good Together, is getting married that day. And, Neal's been invited, and they think that, he's distraught over the wedding, and that this is, what's going to happen. He's sold his mansion. He's moved back to the East Coast, but they are convinced. Ziggy's convinced. They're convinced that the Tonight Show shot will get him back to where he needs to be. We get to Laura's house. Neal goes there to try to stop things, and there's this really lovely scene between the two of them. Erica Gimple is fantastic. Erica's another actor with a lot under her belt, including the role of Coco Hernandez on Fame. She was on The Profiler, ER, Veronica Mars. Someone who's got an incredible career, and I think was a fantastic guest star for them. It just really, really brought something wonderful to the character of Laura. And I'll talk more about that later, because I feel like there's a scene later that is just absolutely beautiful. And it's the emotional climax of the episode in so many ways. It's really lovely. The the end of the scene, there's a lot of comedy in this scene. There's a lot of comedy in the episode overall, but there even as broad as some of the comedy can get at times, it feels very grounded, and I just love it so much. There's a moment where Addison's frustration with Ben encouraging Neal to try to win Laura back, it's clearly a comedic moment, but it just feels so real and honest as well. The other co-star from Awful Good Together, is coming out, the soon-to-be husband of Laura, wielding a katana to try to take Neal out, or at least scare him off. Laura, of course, gets control of everything, and the way she shushes Neal is just priceless. And again, feels so honest but so funny. So I love the humor of the episode all together. It's some really great stuff. But Ben is clearly holding on to his relationship with Addison and hoping to find a way to get that back. He there are things that he says, or that Neal says, never bail when you found the one. And at times, you get the sense that Ben is talking to Neal and means it for Neal. He's talking to himself in a way too. He's also talking to Addison. It's just really lovely the way that the dialogue plays on so many different levels. And there's, this intrinsic value to it, but at the same time, I feel like there's so many things that we as an audience can draw from it. And it's one of the reasons why the episode, I think, honestly, improves with repeat watches, even though I would say that the episode is still fantastic just on that first watch. Like it's an easy 5 stars for me. Back in present day, or future, because it's 2026. Quick side note, I've seen this question asked a lot. Just for clarification, everything that we know, the initial leap took place in 2022, and Ben was leaping all the way into 2023. Basically, that was the time in which from the first leap until Judgment Day, that was the time of the current day projects, kind of like our actual current time while we watched the show, from 2022 to 2023. Ben then leapt back to 2018, which was when Martinez was going to try to kill Addison, to save Addison. Ben jumped into the accelerator in a host body, even though it was his own host body, and that's when things kind of went caca, and he ended up getting thrown into the 70s, and this took too long. But during that time, 3 years passed from the moment we see Addison and crew waiting to see if Ben's going to come back through the accelerator. That was 2023. Therefore, it's 2026. Some people were thinking it was 2021 or wondering when the 3 years happened or whatever. It did not happen from 2018. The 3 years happened from 2023. Anyway, back in 2026, we get this awesome scene. It's wonderful. Alice Krimmelberg is back as Rachel. And I just love seeing, Ian and Rachel together again and in a relationship again. They have gotten back together. We get some big information. This is obviously some of our meta plot information. People were wondering, what did Ian do? Well, we're starting to find out. They procured a quantum processing chip from Rachel's boss. Rachel didn't want to have anything to do with it. They were happy to, get Ian the in with her boss, but it was, that was kind of the end of it. And this chip, which allowed Ian to find Ben, is also now transmitting information back to Rachel's boss. So Rachel's boss is able to see everything that's going on. And, one of the things that Rachel says is, why would that matter? They're not going to get anything until you found Ben. She realizes they've found Ben and she's not happy. And, Ian tries to defend it by saying, you didn't want to know anything about any of this. And, Rachel comes back with, I didn't want to know about that, but I mean, Ben it's a different story. It's clear that they've done something wrong here, and the emotional stakes are very high. And as Rachel leaves, we get this wonderful sense that the Lonely Hearts Club is only getting bigger. It's not just Neal and Ben, but Ian is in that club as well. Again, just the way that this episode just feels like one single unit working together in a way that some of the other leaps haven't. And I don't mean that as a criticism to the other leaps, because the episodes have worked, but this one, again, it just feels like we're telling one big story. And we're getting some incredible information. What's up with this chip? The notion too that Rachel seems dismissive of the AI, like, oh, it doesn't matter, they're just going to get this AI, and Ian kind of backs that up. It really kind of begins to make you wonder about the nature of Ziggy and what they are thinking about Ziggy now compared to Ziggy maybe in the first season, certainly compared to Ziggy in the classic series. And it's a good reminder that this Ziggy is in all likelihood a different Ziggy. At least to some degree. And we don't know all the reasons why yet. The continued use of putting, the dangers of technology towards the front of the series is really interesting. We talked about this last season a couple of times, especially I think around Stand By Ben. But it's clear that theme is continuing to run through the story. It did not end with evil Ziggy, which wasn't really evil Ziggy, but I digress. Anyway, it's just a continued theme of the show, and I love how they're exploring that. And there's some moments that come later in this episode that really start to kind of put the technological versus the metaphysical in some fascinating ways. And I think that those deeper themes, the way that the show is exploring them, it bears it, you've got to engage. It can be a challenge, but it's really, really interesting. And I think it goes beyond just your standard, weekly television fare in a lot of ways, which is great. So we get this wonderful car scene. There's a couple of great car scenes in this episode, actually, where we have Ben and Neal in the front seat and Addison in the back seat. And Ben references the bounty hunter leap from season 1. Ben relates to Neal. He gives this monologue about losing the love of his life, being adrift. Addison leaves. She blanks out. She doesn't really want to hear this, and who can blame her? She confides in Tom back at the project. Again, another example of the way that the story is weaving in and out of these times and places in this wonderful way, as opposed to feeling, we have our leap story, we have a project story, which is just great stuff. And Tom is encouraging, says some sweet things to her, also encourages her to let Ben lead and trust that she'll know what to do if it goes sideways. And it's really interesting advice. I think, I appreciate Tom's stance on a lot of this, that he is not there to um, protect his position, if you will, as Addison's significant other. He's there to support his partner. And I really appreciate that. Um, does Tom still, do I still have some issues with Tom overall? Yeah, maybe. I'm just not 100% sold on him yet. And it's not a, oh, I think he's a bad guy or any of that crap at all. It's just, there's everything else feels very in place, and Tom just feels a little step out. We'll get to that later, though. But I do really enjoy this scene, and I appreciate what he says. I appreciate like the content of what he's saying, even if his presence is still jarring me just a little bit. So I enjoy kind of his ability to support Addison without feeling like he has to be protective or territorial, which is nice, and it's written in such a way that that comes across very, very well. I like the idea too that he and the other characters, for that matter, have faith in Addison to do the right thing, not only for the leap, but for herself, for Ben, and it's really fascinating because there's this wonderful scene that occurs a little bit later with Ian and Addison, and it's just lovely. The way that these characters are supporting one another and sharing with one another, and they certainly have had this experience with Rachel earlier in the day, and now they're relating to what Addison is going through. But we'll get to that just a little bit. But anyway, we go back to the leap, and we get this hilarious scene of stealing the tuxedo from the wax museum. I say hilarious because the convention of it is hilarious, but wow, we get some really incredibly like grounded moments of gravitas as Neal kind of contemplates aging and mortality and beauty. And it's kind of incredible because, again, in this moment that could be just strictly played for hilarity and could be painted in these broad strokes, it never forgets the humanity of the situation. And that's what the show does so well, so many times, so often. They never forget the humanity, the humanity of these characters, the humanity of the viewers, frankly. And I feel like it connects us to those moments, and it increases for me personally, it increases my ability to laugh at the moment while also really feel something from the moment. And of course Matheson is great in the moment as well. Ben has a funny line about the dummy doesn't really look like him, which it doesn't. But it's a really nice moment, and there's also, of course, this plot point of the idea that this is the tuxedo from Awful Good Together. When he and his character and Laura's character got married on the show, and boy, that tuxedo was something else with like the gold lame on the lapels, and whew. The 80s were a fun time. Anyway, they get caught. Now, if you've listened to, which you may not have, but if you've not yet listened to the interview with Christy Laurie, there's some wonderful behind the scenes information about this scene and about how it was a little different to begin with. But ended up having to be trimmed for time. Works fantastic as is, but it is also fascinating to think what the scene might have been otherwise. So check that interview with Christy Laurie out for that information. They use Neal's career to get out of being arrested in an inventive way. Addison helps because they're able, by way of Ziggy, to track down the receipts for this police officer's video rentals. And there's this circus movie that Neal had done that the cop's daughter had seen. And it's just this inventive and fun way to kind of get out of it. And while it is certainly kind of played for humor, and there's some wonderful moments of, Ben saying, "Oh, the mayor's daughter." Addison's like, "Mayor doesn't have a daughter," and Neal did this thing for the mayor's daughter, and Neal's like, "I did," and it's just there's some really nice stuff that happens there between the three of them as the cop kind of unawares gets the wool pulled over his eyes, and they're able to escape. Then we get what, for my money, is just one of the best one of the best scenes of the season, of the show. 3 episodes in a row now, we've had some incredible moments having to do with the dissolution of the relationship between Ben and Addison. We get in episode 2, we get this wonderful moment where Ben is clearly scared. Addison's not there. Where is she? And he's kind of looking around, and we see back at the project, they're on the view screen. Addison is watching him. And it's just this incredible moment that you feel these two people kind of searching for one another, separated by time and space and this video screen. And it's really lovely, the impact that it has on Addison and the way Caitlin plays that moment, and the impact that this is having on Ben and the way that Ray plays that moment. And of course, the end of that episode when Ben figures out that Addison has moved on, and the heartbreak and devastation. I mean, it's just such an incredible moment of acting. And I stand by what I said. I think it's right up there with the most heartbreaking scenes from MIA in the classic series. And it's just a heartbreaking moment in general. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And Caitlin and Raymond have been so good together. And this season, by turning that relationship on its ear, they have been able to just take it to another level as far as I'm concerned. There is the build to the scene, the way that it's written, it almost comes out of nowhere. It starts off with this, kind of, it's almost, it's by subverting the expectations that the scene pays off so well, because it starts off in this kind of normal manner. Addison's like, hey, Ben, you were right. It's not all about getting Neal to the Tonight Show. Back at the project, they've discovered that Neal has a daughter, and we're here to reunite father and daughter. How great is that? And Ben's just not having it, and he's arguing with Addison about this, and Addison mentions Tom, and Ben has this wonderful reaction to Tom, and the jealousy, the hurt. I mean, it's so identifiable. It's so, and as you're watching, it's like, oh no, Ben, don't go there. And he does, and it's beautiful. And Addison is feeling guilty. And it's just so good. They're both phenomenal. And it's kind of weird because everybody back at the project is watching this unfold. And let's not get into how that happens or why that happens, and just, accept it and suspend our disbelief, because if we try to pick that apart, you're you're watching the wrong show right now, that's for sure. But anyway, this moment is just so beautiful, and Caitlin and Raymond are so good. And when Ben says, what I needed was for you to wait for me, Caitlin is superb here. It is her finest moment thus far. It is her best work. She's just incredible. This monologue about waiting for Ben, about searching for Ben, about when the project was shut down, she tried to jump into the accelerator hoping that she would end up with him. That she buried him, that she had to give a eulogy for him. Again, the writing is phenomenal, but Caitlin elevates everything. It's an incredible piece of work. It really is. And the two of them together as scene partners, they're just doing some absolutely wonderful stuff. And seeing something like that, it just makes me think like, man, I can't wait for what's next. Not in terms of like the story or anything, but just to see, the actor continue to grow and continue to do new things and continue to find these challenges. It's an incredible piece of work. And yeah, I think especially after episode 3 and seeing what we saw in episode 3 and Ben's frustration and Ben, snapping and yelling, and now Addison kind of having her rebuttal, it's such a beautiful, complete picture. Episode 3 and 4, that emotional through line, it's like you have to pair these two together. You couldn't just watch one, in my opinion. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Um, we, you know, we I skipped a scene that's important to the meta plot. Is Jen confronts Ian about what they're hiding, and Ian confesses that the chip is transmitting data every time Ben leaps. Jen says that she's going to build a firewall. Hopefully, they'll buy them some time. Obviously, this storyline will continue, but it's very interesting that whoever has supplied this chip to Ian, that they're now using. Well, I mean, we know it was Rachel's boss, that he's now using this information, or getting this information anyway, using this chip to transmit that information. So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting to find out what the heck's going on over in that department. But back to the scene with Ian and Addison that I mentioned earlier. Addison, obviously at this point, that moment was difficult for her for a lot of reasons and brought up a lot of stuff. And I think that it's clear that Addison feels like she's failing Ben, and she's, she wants to be there for him, and she's trying to be understanding and sympathetic and empathetic. But he's so angry, and he's so hurt, and he's so sad. And it's this disconnect, right? For her, it's been 3 years. For him, it's been like 3 days. And so trying to sympathize and empathize with someone when that perspective is so wildly different, as best you do, you're never really going to be able to make it match up. But I love the tenderness of this scene. I love the way that they're able to connect. I love the way they're able to connect over Ian's, fight with Rachel, or Rachel kind of, leaving them at the restaurant. I'm so glad that Rachel was in this episode, and I hope she's back on again sometime soon, and that their relationship is not over. But anyway, the very clear situation here is that Ben is not ready to deal with this yet. And how could he be, right? For him, again, it's been 3 days. Neal and Ben get to Laura's right before the wedding, and Ben is like very gung-ho, like, go get her, this is what it's going to happen, this romantic gesture. We've got these roses, we've got the tuxedo, like, it's all in place, it's going to happen. And they can't get through the front gate because Neal gets a little overzealous, so they have to climb through some bushes. And as they climb through the bushes, the heads of all the roses fall. And Ben makes lemonade out of lemons and pulls one rose out, a single rose, and gives it to Neal. Neal doffs his Planet Hollywood hat and goes in to talk to Laura. Erica Gimple is lovely here, both in the way she looks, but in her performance as well. There's just this wonderful tenderness. Ben has prepared this speech for Neal, and Addison pops in to hear the speech that Ben is clearly prepared for Neal. It's just really, really lovely. And Matheson is great. Gimple is great. And obviously Caitlin and Raymond are great. As Neal gives this speech about, waiting for someone, and it's like everything Ben wants to say to Addison. And Laura's response is everything that Addison can't quite give Ben right now. Or maybe she could, but she hasn't had the chance to yet. And this wonderful, lovely thing is that Laura, it's really, I can't even, just how beautiful it is when she just looks at Neal and is like, are you okay? Again, Gimple is phenomenal in the moment. Matheson is beautiful. Caitlin in the background is breaking my heart. Ben kind of in the foreground as he's watching this happen. It's like, it's such a beautiful, touching, moving scene. It doesn't come off melodramatic. It doesn't come off soap opera at all. I absolutely would argue anyone who has tried to make this out to be some soap operatic turn in the nature of the relationship between, I defy them it's not that. It's clearly not that. It's also interesting because even in the interview with Christy Laurie, we talk about the romantic comedy nature of the episode, and it's not that really. It's easy to kind of call it that at times, but it's not. And it defies kind of genre in a way. If it's a romantic comedy, it's it's a kind of a depressing one. But I mean that in a good way. But this scene is just beautiful. And the way that Laura, lets Neal know that this is not going to happen, that she's moved on, that he needs to move on. And the way that it lands on Ben and the way that it lands on Addison is absolutely beautiful. It is the type of scene you can only do in Quantum Leap, as far as I'm concerned. When you have two characters in the present, in their reality, one character who has leapt into someone else and is in the room physically, but they themselves are from the future and are experiencing something else completely different. And then we have a hologram from said future checking in on the person who's leapt in. Like, it is the type of scene that can only be done for Quantum Leap, and it is beautiful, it is masterful, it is just fantastic. I love the writing, I love the acting, I love the direction, I love everything about this scene. I think it is a piece of Quantum Leap at its finest, and that goes back to the classic series. It's just lovely. I'm such a fan of it. The moment when we see Neal just deflate and realize that, like, I'm going on my boat and I'm done. And before, of course, we get all of that, we get this lovely scene between Ben and Addison, which is an extension, obviously, of the scene I'm just mentioning, where Ben apologizes. Addison's like, need to apologize. It's just lovely. It's just, Caitlin's fucking phenomenal. Ray is just one of the best damn actors on television right now. I mean, it's so good. And I love what it means for the characters. I love seeing, the journey that Ben has gone on over the course of these past couple of episodes, and the impact that that's had on Addison, especially after obviously the 3-year gap and Addison moving on, the impact that it had on Ben. Now seeing that impact on Addison, seeing, this all of the sudden, all of this tension start to release. It's incredible. The lovely thing is the episode doesn't take the easy way out, and I fucking love that. And we'll get to that in a second. Back at the project, we get another phenomenal scene. I mean, I'm telling you, from the time that Addison gives the whole, I try to leap into the accelerator monologue until the end of this episode, we're talking just the best. I mean, the best. I absolutely love it. This is the first time I found Tom compelling so far. And I know we're only 4 episodes in, and he's really only been in like 2 episodes, but I want to see more of this Tom, and I want to see it stat, because I want to be on board with the character. I want to be on board with the actor. I want to be on board with, the whole thing. I don't want to feel like I'm taken out when I see him. Because this is great. He has this scene with magic, and we learn that Tom is a widower. We learn that he knows what it is to be powerless, and that even here in this, he's working on a time travel project, that feeling kind of still exists in some ways. And he espouses this theory that is, I mean, it shook me to my core when it comes to Quantum Leap as a whole. The past 34 years of Quantum Leap history, in this moment, all of a sudden I was just, oh. And he says, what if the nature of leaping is sacrifice? It's a one-way ticket. All this time we thought when Sam Beckett, he name checks Sam, which is great, got into the accelerator, something went wrong with the project. And we've been spending all this time to, try to get him back. And Magic, of course, still wants that. He wants that for Sam, and he wants that for Ben. And he makes that clear. But Tom says, what if that's not the case? What if the whole engine that this works on is sacrifice, that you go in and that's it, you don't come back? And who would ever want to do that? And Magic just responds simply with, there's something deep inside of us that strives to do better. And I love that, and I believe that so much. I want to believe that so much. It's just phenomenal. It really is. And it's the type of thing that when you approach a piece of kind of legacy media like this, and you decide to introduce a new idea, if you do it in too ham-fisted or bullheaded of a way, it can alienate fans and make them feel like you don't care about, this thing that we love. when you do it in such a wonderfully nuanced way, in such an impactful way, in a way that really makes you take pause and think, not only is it incredibly successful, it deepens my appreciation and understanding of what came before. This is a turning point, I think, and it is a beautiful moment, and I hope it's followed up on. I hope we get more about it. I don't care if we ever know the answer for sure, quite frankly. But I just love the introduction of this thought, of this idea. I found Tom compelling in the scene. I love the scene with Magic. Magic is Ernie's just chef's kiss, beautiful. It was great. Back in the Leap, Ben is taking Neal to his daughter's house, unbeknownst to Neal. And, Neal's like, how did you find out? And Ben, of course, shows him the letters from earlier, which is how he found out about the wedding, which is another great element of the writing, right? It's like he's got the stack of letters. Ben takes the stack of letters, figures out, Laura's getting married, and they're able to do this. And now, oh yeah, the daughter, this is the address. Like, it's just really, really lovely. And it's a great, kind of almost Chekhov's gun. It's, it's Neal Russell's mail. Anyway, the car scene again is just really lovely, and with Addison in the back, and Ben tells Neal about SOS basically, and about Addison seeing her father, and about how it allowed her to be angry, and it allowed her to connect. And and SOS is a phenomenal episode, and Brandon Routh is awesome, and if we ever get to see Addison's dad again, I'm okay with that too. And Addison is emotional here, because Ben does something else that's really lovely. Ben doesn't say my ex, Ben doesn't say my fiance. Ben doesn't say, he says my friend. He says, I have a friend. I mean, it's just really, really nice, to be able to refer to her in that way. I loved it. Matheson is great. Obviously he and Raymond work really well together throughout the course of this episode. They nail the comedy, they nail the heavier moments, and this is arguably the heaviest moment for Neal of the episode. Maybe not. I take that back. The heaviest moment might be the episode the moment with Laura, but this is certainly that moment of emotional release for him. The catharsis, the pathos that's generated throughout the course of this episode is really, really wonderful. And, for Neal to break down in the way that he does, everything kind of comes full circle for him. All the fears about his career, all the fears about, being alone, all of that, really what it comes back down to is he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to be hated by his daughter. He doesn't want to, to be the guy that was never around, he regrets so much about that. And Ben is able to encourage him to take that first step to go knock on the door. And he does. And it's a lovely little moment, even the actor playing his daughter, like it plays so well. From a distance, we find out that Neal becomes a grandfather. Neal makes the Tonight Show. Neal tells the story about his day on the Tonight Show. His book, Awful Good, because of bestseller, he makes 7 more movies. Addison says we have 7 more movies, Neal Russell movies. And Ben, who of course has talked about feeling adrift, feeling lost, feeling alone, it lands on him. And it lands on him in this lovely way. And you can just see reading Ray's face. Like, it's that we is not Ben and Addison. That we is not Ben, Addison, Ian, Jen, Magic, etc. That we doesn't involve Ben at all. Ben is not a part of the we anymore. And as he was leaping through time, hoping that he would come back to Addison, he was still a we, because he and Addison were together, engaged, going to be married, and he was trying to get home to her. He was disconnected from the rest of his friends, right? Now, he's disconnected from everyone. He's no longer a we with anybody. And it's in that moment he makes a decision, and it's the reason why earlier I said they don't take the easy out, because there's this wonderful resolve to a lot of the tension, but the resolve takes time. And Ben needs that time, and he needs distance. And he says, I need a different observer. You can't be my hologram anymore. And walks off and leaps. And, Addison obviously is hurt by this, but it's just such a wonderful moment for the show. It's again, the emotional journey of the character, the humanity of these people is at the forefront, and it's a beautiful moment, and it's handled really well. And I think for viewers now, the question, remains, is like, okay, well, if Addison isn't the hologram, who will be the hologram? I know obviously we'd love to see Ian as the hologram again, but can they be the hologram right now when everything else is going on, and everything else is in flames around them? They might have bigger fish to fry, quite frankly, than being Ben's hologram. Could Jen be the hologram again? Could Magic be the hologram again? Look, if you're seeing this by now, you've seen the trailer, Magic's going to be the hologram in the next episode. But it's, yeah, I just love the fact that they keep risking, they keep taking chances with the show, and they keep pushing things forward. That this show, as much as I dearly love the classic series for so many reasons, obviously I wouldn't have done a podcast about it for as long as I have if I didn't. The classic series was fairly formulaic, and they got around that formula in a lot of ways by going to new places and new times and telling different kinds of stories. But ultimately, Sam leaps in, Al shows up, obstacle, 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 Sam overcomes obstacle, Al does the wrap up, Sam leaps out. That's pretty much, with a few exceptions, every episode of the classic series. In this series, by changing who the hologram can be, by changing the circumstances of our leaper, Ben having his memories back, but it's really fascinating the way that they're not afraid to change the status quo. And we're only 4 episodes into season 2. This isn't like a show that's been on the air for 5 seasons. Furthermore, it's not an episode or a show that's been on, pardon me, for 22 episodes, a season. So I really appreciate the fact that, that they're willing to shake things up. And if they shake things up and eventually we get back to where we were at the beginning again, I'm fine with that. If Ben and Addison get back together, great. If they don't, I'm really okay with that too. I have no expectations. And I think that that's kind of lovely in a way, to be able to go into this without having expectations. Because there's just so many different places they can go, and there's so many different stories that they can tell, and there's so many different possibilities and combinations of people now that we can see. And quite frankly, with the discussion between Tom and Magic, it's got me wondering, is somebody else going to get into the accelerator? Is someone else going to leap at some point to challenge the notion that it's a one-way ticket, or they don't care that it's a one-way ticket, that something must be done? I don't know, but I'm here for it. Whatever they decide to do going forward. Again, just to kind of recap, the emotional journey that we see Ben and Addison on throughout the course of this episode is beautiful. Some of Caitlin's strongest work ever. No, not some of her strongest work ever. It's just really fantastic. Ray continues to astound me and be wonderful, and Ben is just an incredibly compelling character, and you cannot help but feel for him and his situation in wonderful ways. Tim Matheson is a fabulous guest star, amazing. Erica Gimple, just lovely work. Really, really great. The combination of the humor and the heavier stuff works so well, and oftentimes it doesn't sit side by side. It's right on top of one another, and it's beautiful. The episode, again, from start to finish, just feels like one big story, as opposed to A story, B story, C story, or whatever. I love the interactions between Ian and Rachel. I love the stakes for Ian over the course of the episode, and everything that they're put through and that they have to deal with, both on a personal nature and this professional nature as well, and how it's kind of all tied together. The mystery, the introduction of this, mysterious Chip and Rachel's boss, and what that's going to mean for the project going forward. Will we get a competing project? Is that what's happening here with this information that's being stolen? Is this some sort of weird, this is how the Martinez project starts? Who knows? There's all sorts of things that it could be. Yeah, I'm fascinated to find out where they're going to go with this. Does it turn out that Rachel's boss is Hannah's son or grandson or something like that? I don't know. What does Hannah have to do with all of it? So there's the mystery, which is cool. I love that. But ultimately, I think the big takeaways, the emotional journeys that Ben and Addison go on, and of course the revelation at the end that Ben doesn't want Addison to be his hologram anymore because he needs time and he needs space and needs to get over her. One moment I forgot is there's this really funny moment where, Ben talking about, waiting all time and space for her and going through all time and space for her. Neal comes up and he's like, "Hey, there's some crazy woman shouting about time and space." And it's again, the way that the comedy interacts with the drama is lovely. And that's one of those great moments. And it's Shakespearean, right? You have this incredibly heavy, gut wrenching, tear inducing moment, and it's followed up by this very humorous kind of quick moment with the goofy Neal Russell coming through and pulling Ben away. It's great. So 5 stars. I love it. It's one of my favorite episodes. And I'm surprised by that. It's not the action adventure. It's not necessarily the family drama necessarily of some of the classic series episodes that I love so dearly, but it is shout out to Thou Shalt Not. But it is just a fantastic episode of Quantum Leap. And it's a story that only Quantum Leap can tell, and told in a very Quantum Leap way, with scenes that are specific to Quantum Leap that are done masterfully. And kudos to the writing, the directing, the acting. It's just such a winner for me, and I love it. And I'd love to hear your opinions. So drop a comment below, shoot me an email if you like, find me on social media, tell me you think I'm an idiot and that I don't know quality from quality, or tell me how much you loved this episode and you agree that it's one of the best episodes of the Revival series so far, that you love the journey our characters are on, because I know I do. So there you go. There is the Lonely Hearts Club. I cannot wait to see what's next. One Night in Koreatown. Spoilers, I have seen it. Full disclosure, I won't spoil anything for you. It's going to be a really interesting episode to talk about in a lot of ways, and I'm looking forward to that a great deal, because it's a different kind of episode, as they all have been this season, and I'm really appreciating the journey they're taking us on in that respect. Season 1 obviously was a lot about finding their footing, telling this big story, trying to kind of like get the engine moving, and now it's moving, and it's moving in all these really unique and wonderful places. It reminds me a lot, actually, of if you look at the classic series of Quantum Leap, season 1 was very much about finding their footing, figuring out what kind of stories they could tell, how they could tell them. There were some classic episodes, some great episodes, but season 2, they found their sweet spot, and season 2 of the classic series still might be my favorite season of Quantum Leap. So here we are in season 2 of the Revival, and I'm thinking, man, season 2 might be my favorite season of Quantum Leap. So kudos to the cast and crew. Thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Remember to like, subscribe. Let's get to 500 subscribers. I can do some awesome things here over on YouTube and continue that presence. Stay tuned to social media, and if you want to head over to Patreon to support the show, please do. There's going to be a lot of really cool, exciting goodies over there soon. Some wonderful stuff to announce, and some giveaways in the future as well, which will be announced here on the show and social media. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to sign up for that if you so choose. Thank you to everyone for listening, taking the time to put me in your ears or before your eyes. Hopefully I don't look too horrible today. And thank you again in advance for your understanding with, these work obligations, preventing me from running the watch parties like I normally did. But yeah, I think we're in for some really, really great stuff in the coming weeks as Quantum Leap Season 2 continues. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and remember, always, always, always be kind to one another and leap responsibly.